Welcome to Psychology Ninjas. Today we're looking at an optional unit on paper 2, and here we're focusing on personality as an explanation of crime. It's worth bearing in mind that personality is also a biological explanation. Therefore, if you've got high tariff questions like 16 markers and it says biological explanations, personality can be included. However, we've done biological explanations as a separate video for you. So, when we're thinking about personality, we want to bear in mind that this is a theory, and therefore to get our AO1 marks, we're explaining key terms associated with personality as an explanation. We're going to focus primarily on Eysenck's theory of personality, and therefore it breaks down into these 4 key components to talk about: extroversion, neuroticism, psychoticism, and socialization process. With each of these, it's really important that we focus on how this results in crime specifically. So you can see here where we've talked in extroversion about a prone to risk-taking behaviour. We've then linked it into crime by specifying that these individuals are unlikely to see that getting caught is a possibility. You need to make sure that you're doing this all the way through. Equally, you need to be making sure that you link this back to a biological process. So extroverts have an underactive nervous system, which means that they need higher levels of excitement in order to have the same effect. Hence, they have more risk-taking behaviour. With neurotics, we see an overactive nervous system, registering threats when they aren't there. Psychoticism, or being psychotic, is a lack of empathy. And the link to nervous system here is a little bit less straightforward, and you could specify that in your explanation. It's the socialisation process that is integral to whether somebody becomes a criminal or not. Lots of people will be extroverts, not all of them will be criminal. And so if we're raised in a law-abiding way and we're focused in on that in terms of channeling our extroversion into positive or socially acceptable levels of risk-taking behaviour, then criminality is less likely to be an issue. It's worth bearing in mind here that extroverts find it difficult to take on board operant conditioning and therefore don't learn through reward and punishment in the same way as people who aren't extroverts. Similarly, neurotics tend to have difficulties learning social rules and therefore may struggle when it comes to socially acceptable or law-abiding behaviour. So how do we evaluate this? Well, personality and our specific Eysenck's theory is just that. It's a theory, and so we're using SODA to evaluate. We're ensuring that we develop logical chains of reasoning by having arguments and counter-arguments throughout. Don't forget those mini conclusions in order to have a balanced argument and show those logical chains of reasoning, forming final judgments. The highest tariff question that we'll get for our optional unit is 16 marks. Where we've got the command word evaluate here, we want to be balanced in terms of our explanation and our evaluation. But balance doesn't mean exactly the same here, as it has done on paper 1. Here the split of marks is leaning towards our evaluation with 10 marks of the 16 available, and therefore we need more evaluation than explanation. It's really important here, as we said, that we develop arguments and counter-arguments. So once we've explained what extroversion is, key with our link to biological explanation, so underactive nervous system, we're going to say that this is supported by research. Lots of different research that you can use here, and we've gone for Rain et al. 1990. Here we've given our findings that from this longitudinal study, participants were assessed at 15 and 24 years later. Those at 15 who had an underactive arousal system, therefore showing signs of extroversion, were more likely to have a criminal record 24 years later. We're going to counter this by saying that this research is correlational, and therefore cannot show cause and effect. It's important here that you offer another cause or a different extraneous variable that might be pertinent to criminal activity. You could talk about here that there might be brain structure, hormones, social explanations here. Give one and you don't need to go into massive amounts of detail. Therefore, our mini conclusion is that Eysenck's theory of personality lacks validity. We're then going to go on and explain our second key term, neuroticism. However, we're saying here that there are methodological issues. Where we've got the EPI, or Eysenck's personality inventory, that measures these 3 traits, it's an inadequate measure of predicting offending. So although we might have high scores, again, we're saying it's not a causal relationship in that having these high scores mean that offending is particularly the outcome. We can counter that with our research here, with Boswell et al.'s research, where a criminal thinking style does correlate with high levels of extroversion, neuroticism and psychoticism. The fact that we've got additional research here coming to similar conclusions gives this explanation external reliability. Again, it's really important here that when we're talking about our features of psychoticism, we're linking that into criminality as a specific component. We're going to give a different theory here, and we're going to take a slightly different tactic. Here we're saying that actually Isaac's theory of personality is not the only one, and there are multiple personality types and theories. Digman offers us the 5-factor model, where low levels of agreeableness and conscientiousness correlate with offending. We might talk about the fact that offending is a likelihood result of these particular traits, because if we're conscientious, we care about what other people think, and we care about being socially acceptable and fitting in with laws. We're going to counter this by saying that personality is situational, and actually the scores that are generated by the EPI are going to be contingent on what has happened before, and therefore who we're with and what has happened is going to change those scores depending on what's going on in our environment, and this is an extraneous variable. Our overall conclusion is that Isaac's theory is reductionist, and we need to take into account other types of personality. Finally, we talk about that socialisation process with its applications to crime prevention. That actually we can assess children on their lack of responding to conditioning, and therefore we can intervene early with these individuals. We're going to continue this by saying that this model and this theory has an integration of both nature and nurture. That where we're talking about an underactive nervous system, that explains a nature side of the debate, whereas nurture is that acknowledgement of the socialisation process that then contributes behaviour to either be offending or law-abiding but still risk-taking. This interactionist approach is a better explanation to crime, and you could also talk about this being more holistic. So let's have a look at an exam question. Here we've got an 8-mark discuss question, and most of our discuss questions will come with a STEM. Here we're looking at explaining how personality might explain the behaviour of Bilbo and his friends. We want to be really clear here to explain those different types of personality as we have done already, but give each of those with context from the STEM to access both our 4 marks for explanation and our 4 marks for application. We're going to continue with the same STEM, but we're changing our command word here, which has a very different outcome, as well as the number of marks. Here we've got the command word assess. Where we're talking about assess, we need to form judgments, and because we've upgraded this to 16 marks, we're now talking about evaluation as well. This breaks down into a 6 marks for our explanation, and so this would be the same as that previous set of slides. However, we've got 4 marks for our application, linking to the STEM, so we don't need quite as many examples, and we've got 6 more marks for evaluation. So we need to be talking about how personality might explain the same behaviours, but adding in our evaluation. Thanks for joining us today here at Psychology Ninjas. Don't forget to like, subscribe and hit that bell. See you next time.